This episode covers domestic violence, firearm violence, murder suicide, and the allegations of child sexual abuse involving a minor. A child was present in the home and made a 911 call the night of the shooting. We do not name him, and we ask you to take extra care with that part of the story. The man accused of molesting a minor in this case died before ever facing criminal charges. So those allegations were never tested in court. We present them as they appear in police statements and court filings, not as a proven conviction. If you or someone you know is in a domestic violence situation, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. If you suspect child abuse, call the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline. Please take care while listening. It's just past 11 o'clock at night, and a boy is running, not down a hallway, not to another room. He's running barefoot across a dark backyard, past the fence line, cutting through the gap he already knows is there because he's used it before, to a neighbor's porch light glowing yellow at the end of the grass. He's pounding on the door before he even reaches it, and when it opens, he doesn't wait to be let in. He grabs the neighbor's phone and he says the sentence that will end up in police reports, in national news segments, in a headline his mother will never read. My stepfather shot my mother. Minutes later, a dispatcher had already picked up a different call from that same address and heard a woman screaming, and then a sound she later described as what sounded to be a gunshot. She tried calling back. Nobody answered. By the time officers reached the house on North 130th East Avenue, there was nothing left to save. Two adults dead from gunshot wounds to the head. One of them was 48-year-old youth basketball coach named Jeremiah Sean Duffy. The other was his estranged wife, a 43-year-old hairstylist from Owasso, Oklahoma, with more than 78,000 people following her on TikTok, who had spent the last 6 weeks of her life doing everything the system tells you to do when you're afraid of the man you married. She got a protective order, she told the police, and 12 days before she died, she told the internet in a video that will rack up more than 22 million views. She thought her husband was a pedophile, and she said it like she already knew, somehow, how this story was going to end. Her name was Sara Gilson. This is her story. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee and Crime with Mom. I'm Nicole. Mom.
And I'm Zaylee. And Mom, I have to say, this one is barely a week old. We're talking about something that happened on July 23rd, which means as of the day we're recording this, it's been not even 10 days.
Exactly. And I want to be upfront about that the same way we always are with the fresh case. Police have already called this a murder-suicide, so we're not asking who done it here the way we normally would. What we're asking is how a woman who did everything right, filed the paperwork, told the police, warned the world, still ended up dead in her own home with her child in the house. And there's a piece of this that's genuinely unusual for us. The man accused of hurting a child in this story died right alongside her before he was ever formally charged with anything. So some of what we're about to tell you are allegations that never got their day in court, simply because there was no one left to charge.
Let's set the scene. Owasso sits about a 2-hour drive northeast of Oklahoma City, tucked into Rogers and Tulsa counties. It's the largest northern suburb of Tulsa, home to almost 40,000 people. The kind of place with good schools and youth sports leagues and a main street that still does a Christmas parade. It is not, on paper, the kind of place you'd expect to become the center of national conversation about domestic violence and social media in the same week. Sara Gilson had lived there for years. She worked as a hairstylist and on the side, or maybe not really on the side anymore, but by the end, she built a TikTok following in the tens of thousands, doing hairstyling transformations mixed with slices of her actual life. She had 2 children from a previous marriage, a son and a daughter, with her ex-husband Lyle Lander. She and Landers had divorced about 7 years before any of this happened, and by all accounts, they landed somewhere most divorced parents dream of and rarely reach: genuine friendship, easy co-parenting, kids who didn't have to choose sides.
And then there was her second marriage to Jeremiah Duffy, who went by Sean both in person and on his own social media. Duffy was 48, a member of the Osage Nation, and a fixture in local youth sports as a girls' travel basketball coach. On paper, a family man, a coach, a guy who showed up to games. Underneath that, according to Sarah's own court filings, there was a much darker and much older story, one that reportedly started at least as far back as 2021, and one that Sara Gilson had already tried more than once to walk away from. By July 23rd, 2026, that story would be over. But to understand how it got there, we have to go back further than the TikTok video everyone's seen. Because by the time Sarah posted that video, she'd already spent years trying to get free. And before we go further, for anyone who hasn't seen any coverage of this yet, this isn't some obscure local story we dug up. This made national news within days. So we're going to show you a quick clip of one of those broadcast reports right now, just so you can see this is real on the record reporting before we walk through the rest of it.
To more than 30,000 followers, the post is part of a social media trend that mimics Netflix documentaries as people pretend to sit for an interview. After
Okay, so that's the headline version. Now let's actually get into how we got there.
Lyle Landers, Sarah's first husband, is the one who's spoken most publicly about who Sarah actually was. Not the true crime headline version, but the person. He told People magazine in the days after her death that they divorced about 7 years ago and had genuinely become friends. His exact words: "It had been the best thing in the world for our kids, but also for us. We co-parent as well as anyone, and it has shown in our kids." That's not nothing. That's a man describing a woman he clearly still respected years after their marriage ended. He described Sarah as a fun, life of the party girl who loved her kids fiercely and would fight to the death for them. He said her greatest achievement in life was their children, that she'd worried before becoming a mom whether she'd be any good at it, and turned out to be a great one. She went over the top for our kids, he said, and always made sure they knew she loved them. He also said she took real pride in her work as a hairdresser, that this wasn't a side hustle to her, it was a craft.
So that's Sarah before Sean Duffy, or at least that's Sarah outside of that relationship. And here's the part that Lander said out loud on the record that a lot of exes wouldn't. He didn't approve of Duffy, and he told her for years Sean had been a risk for her since they got together, Lander said. I had begged her for 5 years to get away from him. I had offered to help her in any way I could to get away from him. But he seemed to have some sort of control over her, and she couldn't seem to get away.
5 years. Think about that. Think about that phrase for a second. Some sort of control over her. That's the language people reach for when they're describing coercive control. Coercive control. The kind of relationship dynamic where leaving isn't just emotionally hard, it's genuinely logistically dangerous, and where outsiders can see the exit sign long before the person inside the relationship can safely walk through it. Landers put it even more plainly. She had been stuck in a relationship where domestic abuse seemed okay. Not that she thought it was okay in some healthy sense, that she'd been worn down to the point where staying felt more survivable than leaving. And the court record backs up exactly that pattern. Because this wasn't Sarah's first time trying to get away from Sean Duffy. It was, as far as public records show, at least her fourth.
According to court records reviewed by People and by the Oklahoman, Sarah filed two separate protective orders against Duffy back in 2021, one citing stalking, one citing abuse. Two different filings, two different categories of harm in the same year against the same man. And here's the detail that should sit heavy with anyone who's ever tried to help a friend leave an abusive relationship. Both of those 2021 orders were dismissed, not because the judge found no merit to them, but because Sarah didn't show up to the hearing. Poor Sarah.
Right. That I feel bad for her.
Yeah.
That detail gets thrown around online sometimes like it's a gotcha. See, she didn't even show up. It couldn't have been that serious. It's the opposite of that. Advocates who work with survivors will tell you failing to appear at a protective order hearing is one of the most common and most predictable things that happens in ongoing abusive relationships. It can mean the abuser talked her out of it. It can mean she was scared of the retaliation that will follow if she followed through. It can mean she genuinely believed in that moment that things had gotten better or that she could manage it herself. Whatever the reason, it's a pattern researchers see constantly. And it's exactly why so many domestic violence advocates push hard for systems that don't require the victim to personally show up in a courtroom in front of the person she's afraid of to be protected. So in 2021, two protective orders came and went, dismissed on paper, and Sara Gilson stayed with Sean Duffy. Whatever was happening behind closed doors in that marriage for the next several years, it stayed there until June of 2026, when it stopped being just about Sara at all. On the evening of June 9, 2026, Duffy's travel basketball team was using a gym at an elementary school in Owasso, not affiliated with the school itself, just renting the court while classes weren't in session. According to the Owasso Police Department, a 15-year-old girl on that team told her mother that Duffy had kissed and inappropriately touched her during the event. And critically, this wasn't a case of only the girl's word against his. Another coach on that same team reportedly witnessed what happened and, according to police, immediately intervened and reported it to the juvenile's parents, as he should have. Good job, whoever that coach is.
Yes, great job, coach. Because it's too many times where people see stuff and they don't do anything.
Yeah, they
And
don't
I
know
feel
what
like,
to do. They get scared.
yeah, and I feel like him just going to, well, I don't know who the person is as a person, but him just
Mhm.
going and report, like intervening and going to tell the parent
Yeah.
took a lot of self-control, because I feel like if you're a good man, any good man sees something like that, your instinct would be to just hit this person. I feel like he
Mhm.
really thought about the girl
Right.
in that moment.
Mhm.
Okay. The girl told her mother it wasn't an isolated moment either. She said Duffy had sent her inappropriate messages, invited her to his hotel room during a tournament trip, and offered her money, in her words, to keep her quiet. Scumbag. When police started looking into it, they said something that should stop anyone listening in their tracks. Similar conduct by Duffy toward that same child had reportedly been reported over an extended period of time in multiple law enforcement jurisdictions across multiple states before the specific June 9th incident. First of all, that's not a red flag, okay? It was allegedly one in the chain of them that had crossed state lines without ever resulting in charges, which is, it makes no sense. But it makes sense because I know how the jurisdiction works and all
Mhm.
of that. But what?
There has to be a better way of protecting our kids. It's like we have just thrown it out of the window these days. Duffy fled the gym that night. Police contacted his wife, Sarah, to let her know what had happened and gave her the information she needed to file for her own emergency protective order. And because Duffy was a member of the Osage Nation, the alleged crime against the minor got classified as a major crime under the Federal Major Crimes Act, which meant it wasn't going to stay in a local courtroom. It went to the U.S. Attorney's Office for federal review. That detail matters more than it might sound like on the surface, because federal review takes time. Time that, in this case, Sara Gilson and that 15-year-old girl did not have. I did hear someone talk about that, and because he's a part of the Osage Nation, which is a Native American tribe,
Mhm.
then they have jurisdiction over the crimes. And I want to say that I don't remember all the details, but because of the type of crime, that's more than their judicial system that they have set up within their own nation can handle. So then it goes through the
Right.
federal government. Duffy fled the gym that night. Police contacted his wife, Sarah, to let her know what had happened and gave her the information she needed to file for her own emergency protective order. And because Duffy was a member of the Osage Nation, the alleged crime against the minor got classified as a major crime under the Federal Major Crimes Act, which meant it wasn't going to stay in a local courtroom. It went to the U.S. Attorney's Office for federal review. That detail matters more than it might sound like on the surface, because federal review takes time. Time that, in this case, Sara Gilson and that 15-year-old girl did not have. I want to say clearly, because our disclaimer already covers this, but it bears repeating once. Duffy was never charged with any of this, not because the allegation wasn't taken seriously. It clearly was, by police, by the witnessing coach, by the federal system that picked it up, but because he was dead before the process ever reached a courtroom. Everything we just described is what's in the police statements and court filings. None of it was ever proven or disproven at trial.
Honestly, it's multiple reports
Mhm.
across multiple states with him and this one child. So I'm gonna assume that it's the truth.
Right.
And yeah, cowardly, cow. That's
You
it.
are a coward. You didn't wanna face it. The fact that he killed his estranged wife and himself says everything that I need to hear,
Hmm.
because clearly he was afraid of what he was gonna face. He knew what he
Right.
did. That's my opinion. That's
I
my
agree. I agree wholeheartedly. But can we also just sit with the multiple jurisdictions and the multiple states detail for a second? Because that stopped me.
Mhm.
I need to like make sure that we iterate that we're not saying that the police didn't make a report and like they're not taking it seriously because
Mhm.
clearly they were. They had said they apparently heard some version of the same complaint about the same coach and the same child before from more than one department in more than one state. But traveling basketball means that these families across state lines constantly for tournaments, which means a coach with a pattern like this has an enormous amount of room to operate before any single jurisdiction connecting the dots or actually can get all of their paperwork together to really
Right.
even do anything to him
Mhm.
at all. Which
Right.
sucks that it's such a process, like it's a lengthy thing. We have to wait for all of this. But
Right.
if it was
Right.
like the crime shows out there, it would be better.
Right. It'd be
Put
wrapped
in
up
a
in an
call.
hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the hour, that's all it takes. But that's exactly the problem with youth travel sports and background checks in general. They're built around a single home jurisdiction, and predators who coach traveling teams are almost by definition moving targets for that kind of oversight. One state's flag doesn't automatically show up on another state's radar unless someone specifically goes looking. We don't know exactly what those earlier reports were or whether they were ever formally investigated to conclusion. But the fact that police used that phrase at all, reported over an extended period of time, tells you this wasn't a single bad night that came out of nowhere.
On June 10th, the day after the gym incident, Sarah went to Tulsa County Court and was granted an emergency protective order against Duffy. It's important to note that there were actually two separate filings moving in parallel here. The mother of the 15-year-old filed on her daughter's behalf, and Sarah filed her own, naming herself as the one at risk, which she should have done. Great for the mom and great for Sarah. In her filing, according to the Oklahoman's review of court records, Sarah alleged that Duffy had a gun and had threatened suicide and had gone on the run. Judges don't grant emergency orders lightly, and this one came with real teeth. Duffy was ordered out of the family house immediately and told to stay at least 100 yards away from Sarah at all times. I'm happy they did that because there's so many cases where you hear like it's crazy that the judge didn't grant this woman a
Right.
protective order.
Hmm.
So great job. She ran into all the great judges and the
The people that were
coaches. The
coming,
people around them were awesome.
yeah.
They were doing their job. They were doing what
Again,
they
it's
needed
the
to do.
system. It's the way that the system works. It's
Yeah.
not the individuals that are working in the system. And on June 23rd, that order was extended through August 24th, which means that on the night Sara Gilson died, she was still, on paper, a protected person. There is no public report that Duffy ever violated the terms of that order in any way that police were made aware of before July 23rd. He didn't show up at her house that police reported. He didn't call anyone. He didn't call her that anyone reported. As far as the system could see, the order was working exactly as designed.
And that's one of the hardest parts of this entire case to sit with. Sarah did the thing we tell every survivor to do. She reported it, she got the order, she kept it renewed, and on paper, right up until the night she died, it looked like it was holding, but it's just a piece of paper. Even though it's legally binding, even one that's backed clearly by a judge in the police department, it doesn't physically stand between a person and a gun in someone's hand. It literally only asks them to not use it.
Now, here's where this case crosses over from a domestic violence story that made local news to a story that 22 million people watched. On July 11th, Sarah posted a 15-second TikTok using a trend that had been sweeping the platform, where creators film themselves getting ready, styled like they're sitting down for a Netflix true crime documentary, and then drop some absurd or dramatic plot twist as the caption. It's a joke format. People use it for breakups, for petty roommate drama, for genuinely nothing at all. Sarah's version wasn't a joke, even though she wrote it like one. On screen, styled and ready like she was about to sit for an interview, she wrote, preparing for preparing for when Netflix drops a documentary about my soon to be ex husband, who I just found out is a pedophile. The caption underneath, I wish I was joking. And we're not just going to describe this one to you, it's still up on her account. So we're going to actually show it to you right now. This is the real video. Take a look.
$15. That's all it is. 15 seconds. A caption and a look on her face that now that we know how this ends is genuinely hard to watch. That video exploded. More than 30,000 people already followed her account, but this specific video pulled in over 22 million views, a number that dwarfs almost everything else she'd ever posted. And I think what made it spread the way it did wasn't just the shock value of the words she used, it's that she said it using the language of entertainment, a documentary, a plot twist about something that was for her in that exact moment a matter of court orders and federal investigations and a 15-year-old girl's statement to police. She was using humor, in my opinion, in a way that a lot of people in crisis do to say something true that was too big and too frightening to just say blank.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing that I think everyone who watched that video after her death has to sit with. She wasn't speculating. She wasn't being dramatic for engagement. Everything in that caption tracks directly with what was already sitting in a Tulsa County court file. The protective order, the allegation, the federal referral. She told 22 million strangers the exact truth of what was happening to her, dressed up as a joke 12 days before he killed her.
And think about the scale of that for a second. 30,000 followers is a respectable, solidly built following for a working hairstylist doing transformation content. But 22 million views is a different universe entirely. That's the kind of number that gets picked up by aggregator accounts, gets stitched and duetted by strangers who have no idea who she is. Gets served to people who've never watched a single one of her haircut videos. For about 2 weeks, Sara Gilson's Sphere became one of the most watched pieces of content on the entire platform. And most of the people watching it had no way of knowing it wasn't a bit, which is extremely scary.
When you watch it, it feels so eerie, which raises an uncomfortable question about the format itself. That Netflix documentary trend exists because pretending your life is dramatic enough for a streaming deal is funny when it's about a bad hinge date or a roommate who won't do dishes. Sara used the exact same visual language, the styled hair, the direct-to-camera delivery, the wry caption, for something that was quite literally a matter of federal enforcement interest. I don't think that's a flaw in her judgment. I think it says something about how hard it is to talk about real domestic danger in a format built entirely around jokes, and how she reached for the only microphone she had.
After that video went viral, the public record goes quiet for a while. No further protective order violations reported, no new police calls that made it into the news. Sara kept living her life, kept posting, and then on July 21st, 2 days before she died, she posted one more thing. Not a video this time, a photograph with a caption that reads, "In full, may whatever that was never find me again. Please, God." Oh my goodness, this poor woman was just trying to leave this dust-ass man alone.
I feel it in my body, like just I don't know what it is. Like it's just, I just feel for her. That's terrifying.
Then just let her be.
We don't know. We don't know exactly what she meant by whatever that was. It could have been about Duffy directly. It could have been about the entire ordeal, the court dates, the federal case, the fear of the last 6 weeks. But knowing what we know now, that caption reads less like a vague statement and more like a woman who was still afraid, right up until the very end, of something specific that hadn't fully gone away. 2 days after she posted it, it found her.
On July 23rd, around 11:16 at night, a 911 dispatcher took a call about a domestic violence incident at a home on North 130th East Avenue in Collinsville, technically within Owasso's city limits. The dispatcher heard a woman screaming, and then what she later described as sounding like a gunshot. She tried to reconnect the call, nothing. And then moments later, the second call came in. the one we opened this episode with, a boy from a neighbor's home saying his stepfather had shot his mother. Heartbreaking.
When I heard
Heartbreaking.
when I
Not
heard
only did
that
you
her
do
son
it,
was there, that I was just like, "Oh my god." That just made it so much worse.
yeah, not only did you do it, but then you did it while my son was here.
He's just so cowardly. Some of the actual dispatch audio from that night has been reported on by outlets like TMZ and the New York Post.
That dispatcher hearing a woman screaming, then losing the call entirely. First of all, that had to have been so horrible for that
Yeah.
dispatcher.
Mhm.
But that's the last few minutes of Sara Gilson's life, captured on a recording nobody was ever supposed to have to listen to. Yeah, because she should be here. Should have just left her alone.
Being in. When officers arrived, they found Sara Gilson and Jeremiah Duffy both dead from gunshot wounds to the head. Police classified it, based on the evidence at the scene, as a murder-suicide. Duffy killed Sarah and then turned the gun on himself. Sarah's son was taken into protective custody that night and later released to a parent who had no connection to what happened. Almost certainly Lyle Landers, though police didn't specify by name. He was there, he made that call, and now he has to carry that night for the rest of his life.
That is heartbreaking for that baby.
Heartbreaking.
He did not deserve that.
No.
In the days after Sarah's death, a GoFundMe went up to support her two children, the son who made that call and the daughter who lost her mother alongside him. The description reads, Sarah was an incredible mom. Her children were the center of her world, and everything she did was for them. She loved them fiercely, worked hard to provide for them, and dreamed of giving them the best life possible. It goes on. We are creating this GoFundMe to help support Sarah's children as they navigate the difficult days, months, and years ahead. Lyle Landers, her first husband, has been the one speaking for her publicly since she died. He really loved and respected that woman.
He did.
He posted his own tribute, calling her death unfathomable, writing that they done our best to always keep things comfortable and the same for our children, even though we weren't together anymore. And in his interview with People, he said something that I keep going back to. She was a wonderful mother and would die for her children. In fact, her trying to protect children is what ultimately led to her death. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did.
That line does a lot of work. And I
Yeah.
want to sit with it for a second. Sarah didn't die because she confronted a stranger or because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to the timeline as we understand it, the chain of events that ended her life started with the 15-year-old girl on a basketball team telling her mother that Sarah's husband had hurt her, and Sarah believing her, reporting it, filing for protection, and speaking publicly about it. In her ex-husband's framing, she died in the process of trying to protect a child who wasn't even her own.
And that's what she should have did. Great job, Sarah. Not the dying part, but the protecting the child that wasn't her
Yeah,
own. Great job, Sarah. Hats off. I have nothing but respect for a woman who stands up for all children.
that's right.
And as of this recording, a little over a week after her death, there's been no further criminal update because there's no one left to prosecute. The federal case against Duffy over the alleged molestation ends with him. No trial, no verdict, no chance for that 15-year-old girl or for Sarah to ever see it resolved in a courtroom. Reporters have also noted that Duffy filed for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy back in 2024, listing nearly $260,000 in debt, with Sarah as a co-debtor. In an almost unbearably grim footnote, listing a Glock 19 handgun among his assets, valued at $450. The bankruptcy was discharged months later. The home where he shot her was the same address listed in those bankruptcy filings. Whatever financial pressure or instability was sitting underneath this marriage for years, it was there in black and white long before anyone knew how it would end.
Normally, in this segment, we're weighing competing theories about who did something. This case doesn't really give us that. Police have been clear from the start that this looks like a murder suicide, and nothing in public record contradicts that. So instead, let's use this space the way it actually deserves to be used here. Not who did it, but could it have been stopped and where? So, theory one, the system worked exactly as designed, and it still wasn't enough. Sarah did everything survivors are told to do. She reported, she got an order, she renewed it. Police followed procedure. They referred they referred the criminal allegation to federal authorities appropriately, given Duffy's tribal status. There's no documented violation of the protected order before the night she died. Under this read, this isn't a story about a broken system. It's a story about the hard, uncomfortable truth that even a fully functioning protective order is a legal instrument, not a physical shield, and it cannot stop someone determined to use a gun
Not at all.
at all.
Okay, and then we have theory two. The delay built into the federal process cost precious time, which is at 100% what we believe.
Yes.
Because Duffy was a member of the Osage Nation, the molestation allegation against him became a federal matter under the Major Crimes Act, rather than a state case that could move through local courts on a faster, more familiar timeline. Federal review is often slower than state prosecution. Under this theory, the jurisdictional handoff, necessary and legally correct as it was, meant Duffy spent weeks as an accused but uncharged man, free to make decisions about his own life and freedom instead of sitting in custody or moving through a faster local process. We can't know if a faster timeline would have changed the outcome, but it's a fair question to ask. I think that it definitely would have made a huge difference for Sarah. It could have went two ways, either in a positive way or it could have made what happened happen faster.
Yeah.
Because it seems like Duffy was just off his rocker.
Yeah.
So
And I think that, yes, that the federal process did slow it down. I think that it's not a problem that it goes to the federal government. The problem is the process that the federal government has once they get those charges. Because I think it's reasonable that certain crimes would go to the federal government because you have a totally separate criminal process on the
yeah,
reservation. So that makes sense. They need to
yeah,
fix how long the process takes.
that that
Yeah.
part.
And then we have theory three. The public accusation itself was a risk factor. This is the theory a lot of true crime commentators have focused on, and I want to be careful with it because it can slide very easily into victim blaming if we're not careful. Domestic violence researchers have long identified the period right after a victim leaves or right after she publicly exposes an abuser as one of the most dangerous windows in the entire relationship, sometimes called the leaving is the most dangerous time pattern. Sarah's TikTok wasn't just personal venting. It was a public viral accusation of pedophilia against a man already under federal investigation. If the accusation accelerated Duffy's sense that he had nothing left to lose, it may have shortened rather than created the timeline to violence. This theory doesn't put any blame on Sarah for speaking the truth. It's about what her speaking that truth may have triggered in someone who already had a documented history of guns and threats of violence. Because I do want to be clear. I think that she had an absolute right to go and make that video. She wasn't the one who did the wrong thing.
Mm-mm.
So she had the right to go and say what was the truth. There's nothing says she can't go and tell the truth as she knows it at that time. So, but whether it escalated something for him in his head, we can't speak to that. That's a possibility, but I want to be clear that we are not blaming Sarah.
No, not it. Okay. Our final theory. The 2021 dismissals set a pattern that never got corrected. Two protective orders, both dismissed because Sarah didn't appear. Though advocates will tell you that repeat dismissals like that often mean a victim needs more support around the process itself. Safety planning for actually attending a hearing, advocacy resources, and a system that doesn't require her physical appearance in a room with her abuser to be protected. All of this seems like this should be basic.
This makes
Like
total
we
sense. I don't
already do
understand
this.
why we're
Yeah.
not there. Yeah.
There's no way to know if different support in 2021 would have changed anything 5 years later, but the pattern was visible on paper years before it mattered most. And I don't know, I just feel like they make it so hard to get protection from people that are hurting you because if I need all of this, why would I want to come be in a room with him?
Mhm.
And
It makes it feel like, I mean, I don't wanna be a conspiracy theorist, but in the back of my mind, it makes it feel like this system is set up to be difficult for you to call a man out for abuse. That's what
yeah,
it feels like. It feels like it was set up by a bunch of old men who wanted to make sure it never turned around on them. And that is just my opinion. It just because we see it so frequently. If I feel like if this was a man in danger, because it does
Oh,
happen to men, it does happen to men, but if it was more prevalent for men, then there would be a process set up to protect them.
yeah.
So where do you land on this, Ailey?
Honestly, I don't think any one of those theories cancels out the others. I think they're all true at the same time because, I mean, that's what makes this case so exhausting to sit with. The system did do what it was supposed to do on paper. The whole process, everything was done correctly, but it still takes time that victims don't always have. And I mean, speaking out, period, is a lot. And it's exactly what we tell survivors to do. So them getting the strength to actually do it is enough in itself. But then statistically, it is one of the most dangerous things they can do because that's why they haven't said anything this whole time,
Yeah.
or otherwise they would have been said anything. So I
Mhm.
don't think that any of that is a contradiction. It's just how broken the whole picture is, even when every individual piece is functioning the way it's supposed to. Because, I mean, like you said, I do feel like the system is set up for a way to kinda, make it
To make
harder.
yeah, just to make it
Yeah,
harder. We just have to make it hard enough so
yeah,
that you won't the next one won't show up. It's
yeah,
to you have to come and be embarrassed and put all of your business out there
right,
in order to be protected.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's exactly where I land too. I keep going back to the fact that she wasn't hiding anything. She told a courtroom, she told the police, she told the internet. There was no missing piece of information that, if only someone had known it sooner, would have changed this. Everyone knew. The order existed, and it still wasn't enough to stop a man with a gun who'd already told her, according to her own filing, that he threatened suicide and gone on the run. That's the part that should scare people more than any twist in a typical true crime case. There wasn't a twist here. Everything was visible the whole time. So, if we're being honest about where this leaves us, a woman is dead, two children are left without their mother, and a man died without ever facing a single charge for anything he was accused of. What do we actually know for certain? What do we know for certain? And what's still hanging over? Sarah did not miss a single warning sign. She did not stay silent. From the 2021 filings to the June 2026 protective order to the July TikTok video, the pattern here is a woman who kept reporting, kept documenting, and kept trying to protect herself and ultimately someone else's child. The protective order was legally sound and as far as public records show, unviolated, and it still couldn't stop a bullet. This case is a hard argument against the idea that a piece of paper alone equals safety. And the federal jurisdictional process triggered by Duffy's Osage Nation membership meaningfully slowed down the criminal side of this case, keeping an accused man free and unresolved for weeks while the underlying danger to Sarah remained live. And Duffy's guilt in the alleged molestation was never proven in a courtroom and never will be because he died before facing charges. We can only describe what's in police statements and filings, not a verdict that doesn't exist.
because it's shocking, supposedly.
This is the case with no mystery left to solve, and somehow that makes it harder, not easier. We know who did it. We know roughly why. What we're left with instead is where the system did what it was built to do, and it still wasn't enough to save her. A protective order that held, a federal referral that followed procedure, a woman who reported everything exactly like she was supposed to, and at the end of it all, a boy running across a dockyard to a neighbor's door.
I keep coming back to the last post. May whatever this was never find me again. Please, God. 2 days later, it found her anyways. I don't have a neat way to close that out, and I don't think we should pretend we do.
If there's an update in this case, anything about the 15-year-old girl's family, anything more about how Sarah's kids are doing, any further reporting, we will come back to it. For now, we just want her name remembered as more than a headliner. Sara Gilson, a mother, a hairdresser, a woman who spoke up.
Thank you for being here with us, co-conspirators. This one's heavy. We know that. If it moved you, please leave us a review, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if this episode brought anything up for you, if you're in a situation like this one we just described, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You deserve to be believed and you deserve to be safe.
Send us your cases and send us your thoughts on this one. We read everything, we promise. We'll be back soon. Until next time. Bye.